So I checked out the website and I signed up. I actually met a gentleman here in Illinois.
All right.
I'm sure he's going to listen to this podcast, and I'll hear back from him sometime. I won't mention him by name, but we were just talking about how many people are in our vicinity. And here in Illinois, there's not too many. I think that freedom thrives in other parts of the country more than it does here. But it's nice when you actually find somebody who's like-minded.
Yeah.
So we had a sit down, and because I wanted to know more about what his interest was and everything. So we talked about developing these little these cells that start with like between 8 and 10 people, right?
You guys met in person?
We did, yeah. So
Awesome.
he lives about an hour away from me. So we just I wanted to get to know what his philosophy was. We were talking a little business, but I just wanted to see what he was doing with the freedom cells, and there was a lot of things that came to my mind as we were talking.
Yeah, so it all centers, Freedom Cells is like a peer-to-peer network based on mutual aid, achieving common goals, and ultimately the bigger picture thing. I always like to, like Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. I always like to talk about where it is that we're heading and why we're doing this. It also motivates people, but essentially what we're trying to do is create the free society that we're all yearning for, and create it as the state crumbles all around us. So we have that infrastructure, that social organization built where we can engage in common goals, where we can engage in large-scale decision-making if we want to pull resources or acquire land or buy this or that or whatever, or pay a private defense contract company to defend our people, or I don't know, whatever it turns out to be. But the way that it's organized is it all starts with what's called the inner cadre, which is a group of around 8 people, your closest confidence, friends, trusted people or whatever. And we choose the number 8 based on the research of this gentleman named John David Garcia. It was spread in the Liberty community by a guy named Bob Podolsky in this book, Flourish. But they did some research and found that 8 people is the optimal number if you want to have the most creativity. Creativity was the highest ethic for this guy, John David Garcia. One of my highest ethics is freedom, but having 8 people, if you have like 2 or 3 people or 4, there's not enough ideas, there's not enough ability to implement, not enough innovation, bouncing stuff off of one another. If you have like 15 people, then it can start kind of getting cliquey or bureaucratic, or there's not common vision. So 8 people is that optimal number. Doesn't have to be 8, it can be 6, it can be 10. Really, it can be whatever the heck you want it to be. This is like a framework, an open source idea that people can take and run with, but we found that 8 is the best number. So you have your group of 8, you work together on common goals, you set up Telegram chat, you organize weekly or bi-monthly meetings, and then you set some common goals. Some goals that are popular is everyone has 3 months worth of food, everyone has an off-grid communication means, everyone has firearms and knows how to use them safely and proficiently in defense of themselves, their family, and their community. Everyone has a bug out plan, whether they bug out together or they bug out separately, or maybe one of the 8 people has a 5-acre property on the outside of town and everyone goes there or whatever. You just work together to make sure everyone has a plan. So that's great. You have your 8 people, you're jiving, you're helping one another. And then where the magic happens is you encourage the creation of other groups of 8 people. And so now imagine you have 8 groups of 8, and again, it can be 6, it can be 10, whatever, but let's say you have 8 groups of 8, that's 64 people. We call this the middle cadre. So that group of 64 then links up through a group. Maybe they have monthly meetings. They're not as dedicated to one another through mutual aid and mutual support as the 8, but they're more dedicated to one another than the general population, for example. Ideally, those 8 people live as close proximity as possible, and then the 64 people maybe are spread out across a city or a region. And then what you do is you start linking up with other middle cadres. So what we're trying to do is build what we call a meta cadre. It's inner cadre, middle cadre, meta cadre. In Texas, for example. So we're doing our network here in Austin. There's a bunch of activity in groups in Dallas-Fort Worth area. And then Derek Bros, of course, is from Houston. He's got a crew there. So imagine each one of these city centers being a middle cadre with around 64 people. And then we all link up to have a meta cadre. And the benefit of having these large groups is, we can raise money. Eventually, when we have enough people, we can create our own health share so people can opt out of government insurance and have their even government public-private insurance is what it all is, and have like a health share where we have this common pool where we can help one another if there's an emergency. We can buy land together. And, you know, there's this whole intricate decision-making process that I've come up with in my head, where we're yet to apply it. But there's really a lot of cool, innovative things. And essentially, again, what we're doing is creating a social organization so we can trade amongst ourselves, we can benefit one another, we can protect one another, we can aid one another, and we can slowly but surely reduce our dependence on big mega corporations. Not that I have a problem with Amazon or anything like that, but we can trade amongst ourselves and help one another and ultimately reduce our interaction with the state.